Sup y'all? Today we are talking to the judges of Buckeye Mela 2023, Ano, Nena, Nikki, Karan, and Dee, about their placing and thoughts for the competition. Now let's get into it.
Watch the breakdown.
So the thing is that, again, you have to look at it relatively, right? And so when we talked about creativity and execution, we talked about those as, so it's kind of like this matrix, right? You have creativity and you have execution, then you have formations and you have choreography. And so it's important that across those four combinations, everything is weighted correctly. And by correctly, I mean in the way that like most accurately reflects the competition's vision.
Yeah.
So for them, execution was important enough that it be slightly weighted higher than creativity for each category. So you have creativity of formations was weighted at 15. Creativity choreography was rated at 15. They wanted formations and formation creativity and choreography creativity to be equal effort on the team sports.
Okay.
Those were equal for that reason. And then it was important to them that execution not be sacrificed for the point of creativity, and that be an important component of the performances that were put on stage, cleanliness and high execution. So if you have 15 set formation creativity, they decide that 20 was an appropriate relative offset. The thing is that like it's not immediately obvious the way the categories are broken up, but the thing is that like execution of choreography is also weighted at 20. The sync is at 10, and the quality of dancing is also at 10, and that was how we kind of broke out execution of choreography. So it definitely looks like execution of formations is this like unusually highly weighted one category on the rubric. But if you go into like how it was actually constructed that way and what we were trying to reflect and what aspect of the competition we were trying to reflect, it is captured here in a way where the points add up the same way.
Even with like cohesion, we're kind of in this realm of like TikTok Bhangra where people just think that like you could just do whatever you want and it will be a set. But you have to realize that like you can connect, like Bhangra moves are like Legos. Like you can literally connect any piece to anything, right? You can do Padaka to Folka to like a Jaffa, and just because it connects, you go from one move to the next move to the next move, it doesn't necessarily mean it's flowing with the rest of like your set. We wanted everything when it comes to formations, choreography, mix, like everything really, like all of these things put together, all these factors put together really make a set, and a nice flowing set that will like let us as judges remember it, right? And that's kind of why we added, that is definitely why we added a lot more weight onto cohesion than like previous rubrics have seen.
Yeah, I mean, our understanding was just that the committee wanted to release that kind of on their own terms, so we didn't want to kind of get in the way of that and mess with that process. I think that teams should have like scores by now or probably soon, but that was just not something that we really wanted to disclose at the time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I know I've been in like comps in the past where like, no, don't give them the scores because we want them to fill out some kind of like feedback evaluation forms, and then once they do that, then they'll get their scores, their notes. So I mean, it's annoying, but I mean, like, it's comp specific, so I get it. So first place with FCB at 107.3. Second was Yodhe at 105.3. Third was DDR with 102.2. Fourth was MMD at 93.5. Fifth was UNC at 83.5. Sixth was CMU with 82.2. Furtila Hires at 7th at 80.7. And 8th was Boiler with 73.3. Okay, so full disclosure for anybody who doesn't know, I'm on FCB. I dance on FCB. I dance at this competition on FCB, and like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. The entire pod squad is like in this room right now, and there was nobody else to do this. So yeah, you're gonna have to deal with the bias, but I'll try to minimize it as much as I can. But anyways, so
the thing is that like our deliberation was around first, second, and third, and it was more like within those three teams, where do they fall for first, second, and third? And I think you see this if you look at all of our score sheets. It's not like MMB got deliberated out of third place. They really weren't in the running for third place. So it's also not to say that like we didn't enjoy MMD's performance. I think that like I also heard from some people after the fact that they were really surprised that MMD didn't place because they really enjoyed MMD's performance and it looked really good. They were very clean. We also felt that. Like, it's not that we had a different impression of MMD from that perspective, but I think this is a thing that we'll probably keep saying for the rest of this, for the rest of this episode. It just depends on what the rubric is.
And like to kind of go off of that, a lot of people are like, this is an execution comp. MMD was clean. Why didn't they place? To like reiterate what Nana said, like the rubric might be execution heavy, but execution is an umbrella term on this rubric, right? It's an execution section and there's different things that fall under it, right? So though they might have hit their lines really well formationally, when you look at, I can point out this one part, I think it was in their end segment where they had 4 people come through and do Padaka on the bust. It was cool, like the way, once again, it's a very enjoyable setup and enjoyable bust out, but then when you look closely, you see 4 different iterations of how to do Padaka. Nobody's in sync, right? That's that like the one that hurts the sync, that hurts that hurts form, right? Because nobody's in the same form and therefore nobody's doing the same thing. And that's kind of what happened throughout the set. There's always 1 or 2 people on stage that either weren't dancing properly compared to what the rest of the team were, or just messed up. And it stood out. Unfortunately, to like point somebody out, if you look at Chumar and you watch Purple Jody, when they're trying to move back, they're moving completely different than the rest of the team who was moving forward. And that just kind of sticks out to you. It sticks out to you and not in a positive way, but like it draws your attention to start watching them and not watch the rest of the what's going on stage to see how they're going to recover from messing up. Furthermore, when you talk about, like Nana said, there is a huge impact on set, not impact, sorry, there's a huge this rubric talks a lot about set design. And one thing I did say to MMD was that the set was good, but it was typical in the sense that it was trendy, right? It followed set trends left and right. So there wasn't anything new or being pushed that like teams like DDR, Yodhe were doing. So that like that's kind of where MMD where MMD placed higher in terms of energy and cleanliness over DDR. DDR placed a lot higher in terms of creativity and choreography, creativity and formations, and overall impact.
Yeah, that moment about, or that point that I was making about impact is like, I think definitely one of my takeaways from MMD set. I think, and this was feedback that I gave them, I felt like there were a lot of moments in the set that really relied on things outside of the dancing. And while that is a trade-off that every team has to make when deciding whether to do certain gimmicks, you do have to kind of weigh how much are willing to let the dancing factor into this. For me personally, there was not enough dancing to carry through those moments, and there was references to things that either I didn't understand or the way that things were set up on stage, I like missed something, and or they stopped dancing for long enough that I lost interest in that moment for those 5-10 seconds, whatever it was.
You said something about it relied on things outside of dancing. Can you clarify what you meant by that?
Yeah, so MMD had a lot of like audiovisual components. So there was like things happening on this projector behind them, and either like I don't have TikTok. I don't watch TikTok. There were references to things that were in TikToks that like I'm sure there are people, including on this panel, that like got the references, but I didn't. And FCB also had references to something from TikTok in their set. I didn't get that reference either, but the difference is that for FCB in the setup for their ending segment, they danced all the way through that setup and they danced really well. So even though I didn't get what was happening on screen, I could really appreciate some really solid dancing and creative end segment setup. For MMD, for a lot of those things, like they either weren't dancing or the thing that was happening on stage was not impressive enough where I was able to really enjoy that, even though I didn't get what was happening on screen. That's me, but like that did take away from how impactful the set was, and especially considering there were examples of other teams that night who were able to strike a better balance, in my opinion. I think that really, that for me hurt them, and that took away from how much I was able to appreciate those moments.
Yeah.
Between the second and third, it was probably our longer conversation between the placings. I think it overall came down to execution at this point,
Also,
right?
Is this all
DDR
three?
and yodhe.
DDR
Just
and
those
yodhe,
two.
Okay.
I think we all, if like teams were to ever release their judges meetings post comp, you can hear all the different, like, there was 5 judges and there was 5 different sets of opinions going into each of these, and that's kind of what caused the this deliberation to take a little longer, even though the points were either similar for some group of judges and similar for the other group of judges. The underlying aspect was that where DDR had to step up over where DDR kind of shined over yodhe was that they had more, I believe, creative choreography, right? However, yodhe came out and brought very interesting formational concepts, and not like, I'm not saying DDR did it. I'm saying that yodhe came out and every formation they had that was a concept or a mechanism you could clearly see, right? Versus for DDR, there was like, you could see the idea going on, like the X's or like the V's coming out. But sometimes it was like really messy on their part. Like I think it was at the end of their Jummer, there was like, I think it was Jummer, I could be wrong, but they had 2 lines, and like on the left side of the stage, it was a straight, 2 lines. And then towards like the right side of the stage, it was just not 2 lines anymore. And it's just like constant things like this and under execution. Furthermore, I believe that one opinion that I had that I kind of stood by was that yodhe came out as a unit. Every dancer, 1 through 12, looked similar to each other, very similar to each other. You couldn't tell they were coming from different backgrounds. Whereas opposed to like DDR, I felt like even though they've all danced together in the past, you could tell that there was different styles on stage, and I feel like that allowed for certain mechanisms or certain pieces of choreography they had to get a little messy.
So I am, I think, the only judge that had the smallest margin between second and third. I actually had yodhe and DDR with the exact same number of points, and when they have the same number of points, the question is like, okay, well, who gets second and who gets third? For me, I felt like in that conversation, DDR got second for me because I felt like DDR's set was overall more impactful. The way that I put it was, I remembered more things about DDR's set later into the evening. But my score still reflected everything on LSA. Like, I gave yodhe like a pretty big margin on DDR. They had a margin of like 4.5, maybe 5 points when it came to execution, and DDR only had a 2-point lead on them in set design. Now, for me, I think where they made up the deficit, where they came out tied with yodhe, was on the impact portion. I found it, like I said, highly impactful. I thought that their cohesion was like about the same as yodhe's, and so that's ended up with same points for me. I think the way that the scores panned out and the way that the placings panned out is because, like I'm saying earlier, you have to have the scores to back it up across the panel, and you have to have other judges that feel the same way. I made the case for DDR to get second. Other judges didn't feel like the points were there, and they weren't. So we didn't do that. But I think like the execution thing is really what it came down to. And I think the difference in opinion from the judges is actually about that, right? Like for me, I actually tend to be someone who really values cleanliness and execution in my own dancing and then teams that I've captained, etc. But I felt like DDR's ideas were so wild and so memorable that it still, in that overall impact section, it was high impact for me. There were other judges that felt like the execution problems that DDR was having really took away from the impact for them. So for them, watching that set, it fell flatter. But yeah, even within execution, you have discrepancy of what kind of execution problems they're having. Like Anil said, yodhe had some dancers at the bottom of their roster that were struggling, as did DDR. But yodhe's dancers at the bottom of their roster looked like they were yodhe's dancers that were struggling. DDR looked like they had dancers from a whole bunch of different teams. And then on top of that, you add energy problems. It really is a different kind of, it's a different kind of visual impact. And it was one that really hurt them for this comp. we'll have to see if they, are able to kind of close that gap for future comps, both in terms of execution and also cleanliness. That's something that DDR had a problem with that yodhe just didn't.
I mean, honestly, I had different placing, but I think that like during deliberation, we talked about certain things, and then like I think I was okay with the placings as we decided for different reasons. Though I think like FCB brought a very, very well executed set, and I initially kind of felt like yodhe beat FCB in terms of impact and cohesion and set and like some of the other factors that like I ended up scoring them higher on, which is why I ended up having yodhe in first. After kind of going back and like understanding that Mela wanted to have teams come with creative sets, but they also wanted them to be well executed. I feel like it was clear to to acknowledge the fact that like FCB perfectly executed the set that they brought. So then I was in that way okay with kind of sacrificing my first place initially to the consensus that was made after that. And then so after that, I definitely still felt like yodhe should have been in second. Because of how like entertaining I felt like their set was.
What's up, y'all? Quick plug. If you want to listen to the entire 1 hour and 30-minute conversation where I talk to the judges of this competition more about the placings as well as answer some of your questions, be sure to go to our Patreon, support us there on unlock that content and much more. All right, bye.
So there was actually no deliberation for first place. I think it was kind of like execution, just like FCB's execution just blew everyone out of the water. Personally, like that's what we saw off the rubric. I mean, I could give you my notes, what I thought was pretty good. I just looked at the full set design and the execution. It was just properly hit. Like whatever set design that came in, it was executed properly. So I just thought, like, I barely have any notes for FCB. I haven't really, it's just like not even half a page, just because I was enjoying watching the performance rather than taking down notes of errors that I didn't catch. And then my favorite yodhe of the night, and we kind of like all agreed onto that, was the dark blue yodhe on FCB, because they caught my eye from the starting of the performance to the end of the performance. And that yodhe killed it for me personally. And that's why I don't have really much notes around FCB, but it was just a well put set from start to finish.
No, it was not the best set of the night, and that's reflected in our scores. And that also was reflected in the feedback that FCB got from us. So it was not that they had the best set of the night, but they, again, on this rubric, accrued the most points. Net overall, like, they lost out to some other teams in some other categories, but they just had such a margin on execution. I think they scored the highest, if not almost the highest, on like a lot of those in every single execution section. And so if you look at the set design, they don't score the highest. If you look at the impact, they don't score the highest across the board. But you knock one section like that out of the park by enough of a margin, you can afford to lose points in other categories. So that's basically how it played out for FCB. On a different night with different teams in the lineup, maybe they don't win. On a different rubric, maybe they don't win. But FCB really they really locked in their cleanliness. That set that they danced, they all clearly knew it really well. They hit their moments really well. And, to make sure that they continue to get first place the rest of the season, if they really level up that set design component and they keep that level of execution that they brought to Mela, this is a first place set at not just his competition, but other ones as well. But right now, I feel like they're kind of in this place with their set where, like, it's a very good set, but it's not the best set that anyone's ever seen. And it was not the best set that we saw at Mela.
I think the number one thing that they did coming out of Berg, it was a pretty similar set, but they felt so much more comfortable. They looked more like a unit. Once again, was it the most creative set of the night? No. Was it the most formationally creative set of the night? No. But they had the best dancing. They danced together as a team, and they executed every moment. I think between Berg and Mela, they took drops that they had that kind of hit at Mela. Sorry, at Berg. They took the advice all the judges gave them, and they added to that. For example, if you watch a Berg video, they have this kunda drop where they hop through the lines of like people putting kunda on the floor, and they catch it and they hit jaw. Here, for this competition at Mela, they did the same exact thing, but before the jaw, they squatted, and then hit jaw. Is it the most creative thing out there? No. Could you do more with it? Yes. But did it accent how they got into the drop and how they got out of the drop? It definitely did, and they all hit it together as a team. And they did a lot of things like this throughout the set that made it stand out and hit harder than it did at Bert. I can go on about this one. So the moment I saw the chalk come out, the first thing I said was JVD, right? And it was very reminiscent of, I believe it was World's Best 2015. JVD came out, and in the middle of the set, they hit Fulka. And when they hit the Fulka, they released colored powder into the air. And that's pretty much the same thing that Yodhe did. It probably was in my head, I'm thinking, we're in Ohio. You know who else is from Ohio? LeBron. You know who else throws smoke up in the air like that? LeBron. So they did it again, also in a Fulka.
I'm pretty sure LeBron doesn't do full-kari on the court.
Yeah, you never know. But I think that the thing here was that, like, once again, we've seen it before in the past. I think the rubric said, "It's an idea. If it was an idea we've seen in the past, how do they do it differently, or revamped it?" Once again, going into it, it wasn't that different than JVD did, but it had a larger impact compared to like the rest of the performances that night, because we're judging them only on that night. For me personally, because I've seen it before, on the impact side, if instead of getting like a 6, it probably got a 5, and that because I've seen it before and they did the same setup. Even same thing they did their kunda gimmick too, where they planted the kunda on the ground and they did a formational thing.
I know I've seen that somewhere.
Yeah, it was ASAP at what was it? West Coast Bhangra?
Which ASAP?
The OG ASAP.
Okay.
The one from LA. West Coast Bhangra. I think it was West Coast Bhangra. 2017.
I was gonna say I've seen that, but I could not remember the performance.
But the thing is, like, was it the idea that ASAP did was that they started their set with their kundas in the like a circle formation, and they danced around it, and then they took the kunda and they went. They took that Yodhe took that same concept, but they made it their own here, where they made it formational, where like only one group of them of that formation put their kunda down, and they went to a different side while the other side came over, switched kundas, picked it up, so on and so forth, right? So that was doing an old idea we've seen before in a new light, which to me, compared to the smoke, had a higher effect. It's like, I've seen it before, but you did it better, in my opinion, right? I think overall, like, anybody else want to talk about Yodhe and the chalk?
I just want to say, I just want to say, listen, comps out there, this is the 3rd time I'm going against a team who uses chalk on stage. Okay, actually, no, this is my 2nd time, FCB's 3rd time. Yo, listen, if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna let somebody do that, you better have the best mops in the world. Like, I want that thing scrubbed off the stage.
Did you fall?
No, it was fine for us because we were last, but like I felt really bad for like whoever was right after them, and like I guess it was fine. I don't know. I didn't care. All I saw was like I was getting my bug tied. I was getting my bug tied. I saw chalk go off, and I just like got up and like everybody in my room yelled no. We were all just no. How this can't happen again? Like why? But okay, it was fine. But yes, continue. I'm sorry.
I just also wanted to add to like a thought about Yodhe. It was just people kept asking like, what are your thoughts? It seemed kind of slow. The set seemed slow, or like it didn't stand out. And like seeing it firsthand, it was to me. I felt so interesting because I was trying to figure out what to think about this. But what I ended up realizing the more I thought about it over the night was that it wasn't a new trend of like slow sets. It was kind of reminiscent of, I want to say, Bhangra between like 2012 to 2014, 2016. I'm going to name drop DRP. It felt like a DRP set.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Not necessarily, I'm not saying it was a slow set, but the pace at which it was let you see every idea they had with their choreo, right? Even though the energy probably wasn't there, you could see their ideas left and right. And it led it like versus like now when everybody's trying to like go at like 99 BPM like to the UK, right? People's like ideas within like how they clap and how they like toss their wrists, they get lost in the speed. Here, like the slowness, like the different BPM the BPM change that was different than the whole night, like it allowed us to kind of really digest what they were doing. I just wanted to add that thought about Yodhe out there.
Alright, so now that you understand the placings from this competition, if you want to see how FCB grew from their third place performance at their last competition, be sure to watch that video right here. Other than that, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Bhangra podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And other than that, thank you so much for all the Patreon supporters for making this episode possible, and I'll see you on the next one.